How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to World End Economica Episode 1. So, last episode wasn't really a lot of progress, honestly. We learned a little bit more about Hagana, we learned more about the situation with Lisa and the church, and now we're in a new part of, well, the Moon City. I actually forgot, because there was just a massive train scene. So now we're here. I skipped one line of dialogue by accident, but it's fine. And yeah, I'm keen to see what happens in this episode. Before we get into it though, just a reminder as always to pick up a copy of my dark fantasy original English light novel, The Protector Volume 1, available on paperback, audiobook, ebook, available anywhere you get your books. Just look up Protector Volume 1. Look for the profile, look for the cover you see on screen now, and yeah, January 10th, 2025 is the official release date, so yeah, pick up a copy, and yeah, let's get into things, guys. There are 3 from nanotech companies, 4 from major software corporations, 2 from biotech firms, 2 from insurance companies, and 6 from banks. And then there were 5 from investment banks. Each and every one of them was famous for their rate of earnings and prideful of their proceeds, and they had the task of sweeping up all the proceeds from the wealth on Earth and pumping it into this lunar city. Listing the world's companies in order of market cap within the top 100 companies, 37 of them were on the moon. It's more than one would find in London or New York. The number of companies abandoning Earth and setting up their main offices here were great, but the number that wanted to strike it big was even greater. New frontiers gathered up the brightest of folks. In this era, as long as you had a talented mind and a net connection, you could come out on top. The moon was different from Earth, where everything the eye could see had been developed owing to a long history, and old geezers wielded immense power sitting high upon their thrones. Some random country couldn't monopolize power here, and because of the nuclear crisis, countries everywhere shied away from the bomb. I believe that's shied. Let me just quickly adjust myself. I hate to sit with my back straighter when I do this. Thus, the moon was literally an empty place with no external annoyances. Even placing second or third in a race to come here would still be more than enough for someone to become a key figure in the city. Though their footprints were no longer displayed along with the others in the Sea of Tranquility Memorial Hall, without a doubt they stood on the forefront of humanity. For example, there was a bronze bust in front of the central entrance of Central Plaza. The model of this overly serious-faced statue that seems to look down on pedestrians was E.J. Rochberg, who people said would have simply ended up as an excellent banker had he stayed on Earth. Right now, he was the CEO of a top-class investment bank here on the moon. At merely 29, he got involved in investing in the lunar development trade. In those days, he worked vigorously in lunar development, which few people regarded with much interest, as he gambled upon mankind's career and everything he had. That got the ball rolling. On Earth, stories were told about how he built the city from nothing, although many key figures would say that very few people understood what that really meant. It's just that they rode the wave well, they said. I supported those sentiments, even though everyone knew that how they all approached it less than ideal. At any rate, even though my parents came to the moon at the same time that E.J. Rochberg did, it was evident in the difference in income levels. They worked at leveling the rock to put in soil for the growing and harvesting of crops. Was that not a job from trillions of years before? And on that note, it would have been easier to just have done that back on Earth. That was why I made sure to remind myself of this sometimes by coming all the way out to Newton City by train. Particularly, it was a place that those with little training or education would oftentimes find their big break in the city. That's right, this is actually just Newton City, that's right. If you left the station and headed in the opposite direction of the plaza, Right before your eyes was a path on the right-hand side of the towering building of the lunar government. Among the many glass-field buildings in Newton City, there were many that were built using material cut from dark rock. Because of that, they looked plain at first glance. But in my opinion, it is something that gives off an intimidating air, like something with an unequally powerful gravitational pull. That was the financial district, where banks and investment banks set up shop. Pointing to the street was a simple sign that said Schrödinger Street. My god. Schrödinger Street. Say that 10 times. And there next to it was the bronze statue of a small cat. Aww, look at the cat. The cat had a sly expression in its eyes as it lay sprawled with 1 foot on a single gold plate. Engraved on the gold plate was this: "You can't know the outcome until you open the box." I thought that this was most appropriate for the financial district. Although I hadn't succumbed to any religious beliefs here on the moon, I saw nothing wrong with petting the cat for good luck. I pet the cat on its head and ran my finger along the outline of the gold plate. You can't know the outcome until you open the box. I came here for the sake of telling myself these words. There were many people who went from being more errand runners to becoming the masters of the giant buildings that lined these streets. I literally came to recharge my spirits here. Fair enough, you know. Schrödinger Street on the weekend was pretty much filled with tourists like me. There were only a few taxis running around, not to mention the total lack of black luxury cars. You could see busy-looking people in suits, but the security guards in front of the 5-meter front entrances to buildings were yawning out of boredom. There was a hot dog stand along the road. It was so famous that people ranging from hotshot bankers and traders making $1 million a month to the 6 mile-an-hour mailmen would all congregate and eat there. I heard that it was great being able to get your dog 10 seconds after ordering and then eating it with one hand. People who'd go to burger joints to eat a meal were considered second-rate, and people who'd go buy boxed lunches were just laughingstocks. Is this like a self-insert thing for Isuna Hasekura? He just really likes the idea of hot dogs as like street food. I mean, I get it, but like I much prefer the variety of a packed lunch, but I guess that's why I don't make $1 million moles a month. Thus, being caught up in the flow of walking along this street, I bought a hot dog. Working on a day off. The vendor said something along those lines and placed a fat sausage in the bun. I didn't even think about replying along the lines of, "Don't treat me like a fool. I at least have a stable income." Being treated as one of the regulars here filled me with joy. To me, making money was a means and not an end. However, after thinking long and hard about it, the fastest way to get rich had to be here. When I had come to that decision, I felt a great reverence for the people at the head of the pack here. And with that, I realized that I actually did have a bit of fanboyism in me. So I thanked the guy and paid my respects to the people passing by and walked off more fidgety than usual. Oh, look, there he is, the fella himself. I am an arsehole. And I like hot dogs. The main offices of E.J. Rochberg were with top-tier investment banks like Howard Bros and Platina Smith not far behind, established their massive buildings here. In order to make the most efficient use of space, Newton City was divided into 3 levels. They were the underground level, the above-ground level, and the sky level. I was currently in the sky level, and the main entrances for all the buildings were here. Below this were related companies and rented out office space. The underground and above-ground level portions of the buildings on Schrödinger Street were filled with countless funds and consulting agencies. While walking around eating my hot dog, I would occasionally come across narrow and compact buildings with gilded signs and atriums adorned with chandeliers and paintings. These weren't places where money exchanged hands, but rather places where those with enormous sums of money obtained official legal guarantees. Top-class law firms, accounting firms, and government outlets resided here. After walking a bit more, I arrived at an intersection. In front of me was a strangely shaped edifice that reminded me of the Colosseum in Rome. The entrance was dozens of floors above the pavement, and the stairs leading up to it formed its own plaza. It was such a special place that it was allowed to use up this much space. Occupying the intersection between Schrödinger Street and Bit Street, which was made up of software and media companies, the Lunar United Stock Exchange could be called the city's source of wealth. It was a place where stocks from companies all over the world, not just from the moon, were traded. It was the pride of the world. Combined with various future markets, trillions of moons exchanged hands every day. There were a lot of tourists and a lot of people crowded around the standard bronze statue at the entrance, taking pictures. You could say this was the pinnacle of capitalism and humanity's expansion. The entrance was wedged between giant screens displaying market information 24 hours a day. Currently airing was a discussion between the vice manager of the Lunar Central Bank and the famous CEO of Platina Smith on the relaxation of regulations. Both of them were in their mid-40s and could be considered quite young by Earth standards. On the moon, someone in their mid-40s would be considered elderly, although these two were still full of confidence and energy. I leaned against the giant steps of the stock exchange and ate the rest of my hot dog slowly. Everything here was big, vast, and solid. Being a little brat not even worth a scrap of tissue, buying a hot dog was the most that I could do here. However, I'll use up the one computer in my bag to make money, and eventually become one of the major players here. That wasn't much more than the first step in achieving my dream, but attaching specific milestones to my goal made me think of how rash it was. However, there were many people who managed to pull it off in the past. Thus, there shouldn't be any reason I couldn't do it. I wouldn't be able to understand without looking with eyes wide open. The CEO of Platina Smith, who was talking on the screen, had a yearly salary of 37 million moles, being the highest amongst all the major enterprises here in Schrödinger Street. Normal people would be quite satisfied at making 2 million moles over their lifetime, so no one would disagree that this yearly salary was monstrous. However, there were also many people who made at least 1 billion moles a year working in these offices. These were hotshots whose salaries definitely had teeth to them, and they made tons of money using their expertise and behaved almost like lone wolves. These were the people I looked up to in adoration, since they had neither a real educational background nor a financial backer. My ambitions had still not been fulfilled, so I could only watch them here, but eventually I would stand shoulder to shoulder with them as either rivals or comrades, instead of looking at them from a distance. They were unmistakably billionaires, holding on to the majority of the wealth in this world. Money. Just money. The object of my unbearable desires circulated here like a whirlpool. Is this the story, like, with how much detail is going into, like, his obsession with money and wanting to achieve this goal, like, of just being rich or something? I'm not sure what the full goal is. Is this going to be like a setup of just, like, him realizing that there is more to life than money? I hope it is. There's 3 episodes of this, And I have a feeling I'm not even close to finishing episode 1. There is going to be a lot more of this. This might take me beyond the new year, honestly. Deep breath, ready for round 2. Okay. I squashed the hot dog wrapper and stood up impatiently. Time to head back and look for more money-giving trees. And eventually I would become someone who'd be acknowledged here. And then, after that, while on the train, I fixed my hold on my bag while staring at the giant panoply of Newton City's receding buildings. Whoa! I can't believe it. Really? I'm only now getting the animated intro sequence after 4 episodes. 4 hours into it, you get the animated intro sequence. Oh my god. I am going to be playing this game into March. Oh god. Who are you? Hello again. So this is the Aboski Rockets, the lads that made the High School of the Dead opening. I know that much. Big fan of them. Oh. Eventually we become friends with Hagana, definitely. That's cool. This is so cool, but I did not expect this deep into the gameplay. That's funny. And remember, there's 3 episodes. There's like 3 individual games. So, I'm gonna be here a while. Thank you very much, the Aboski Rockets. A lot of fun. I might need to look up the full song. As expected, visiting Newton City had replenished my reserves after they had been worn down by a week of trading. Paying no heed to the temptations of Paying no heed to the temptations of consumerism found in the bustling streets, I head back to the church. The scenery changed so much that it appeared as if I was no longer the same lunar surface. Even now, I started seeing more and more buildings on the verge of collapsing. There were people draping fishing lines into the canals and people growing their own food to cut costs. There were people selling steamed buns, people resurfacing knives, and even people preparing shoes on contract. It was a place filled with bustling life, far removed from the realm of high profits. Clicking my tongue at no one in particular, I jumped past throngs of buildings while making my way back. While getting yelled at by an old fellow, I jumped off the rooftop at a 4-story building and flew into the air. I could see the Lunar Chinese restaurant off in the distance. Looking around, I could also see the dirty building-lined street that the Big Bull Cafe was on, as well as my favourite tunnel that opened out into the hill. However, it was impossible to stay in the air forever. Thus, I descended gradually with a gravity 1/6 that time of Earth's tugging at me. I absorbed my inertia. Inertia? By bending my knees, then flew up one last time to cover more ground. It's not like I could do this outside of paths with few people passing by. Depending on the circumstances, I could get pursued by police on grounds of dangerous behavior. However, this speeding sensation was simply unbearably awesome. It was totally suited for me, having just been rejuvenated by Newton City. Well, it's time to get cranking and look for the stocks that would bring me the money. And the moment I opened the door and walked in... No, stop! A shrill voice resounded in the air. For a second, I wondered if I had waltzed into the wrong church, but it didn't seem to be the case. I could still hear the voice. No, stop! Stop it! It sounded like it was coming from the halls of the main building. My mind spun in circles for a few seconds, then cleared up immediately. A burglar, and the voice was Hagana. Even though she was a damn cheeky and arrogant woman, she was still a woman. I jumped off the back of the row of pews, flew over them, and dashed down the hall. I heard a shriek and the sound of something getting flipped over. I opened the half-closed door that led to the living room, threw off my backpack, and made a tight fist. By now, my head was swimming in adrenaline, and my body was fully primed for a battle. The only thought in my head was advice I heard from a guerrilla fighter from the Caucasus region, who said that yelling when jumping into a situation had a negative effect. Rushing in grabbed people's attention easily. However, if you could drop down right away, you'd disappear from their sight and approach your target swiftly. Then, once you were within range, you'd get up in one go and apply overwhelming force. If your opponent was armed with a gun, just jump off to the side. He wouldn't be able to hit you. If he wielded a blade, go straight for him. It's not as scary as you'd think. Now, if he's unarmed, just do whatever. I aimed at the dude who had just trashed the room and took a swing at him with my fist. I planted my feet with all my strength to increasing the friction. I think it says to increase the friction, increasing my effectiveness, mass, and thus the power of my punch. As long as your mass was low, the power of your attack would only be what Newton's third law gave you. My punch made a clean hit on my opponent, but it just turned towards me in surprise. With a nice sounding smack, the punch went through unhindered. That seemed to be enough. I got pulled along by the inertia of my punch, and by the time I stopped spinning on my other foot, my opponent spun around awkwardly and collapsed right there. He wasn't passed out, although he might have gotten a concussion. His eyes were zoned out and his hands, which looked like they were trying to grab onto something, were trembling and stiff. Preparing myself to kick him in the air at a moment's notice, I called out to Hagana without averting my gaze one bit. You okay? In the corner of my eyes, I could sort of make out a figure clad entirely in black. It was Hagana. She was standing motionless and silent, stuck against the wall. No audible reply came back. However, she was silent, not because of the usual arrogance factor, but because she was simply unable to speak. The man grabbed onto the fallen sofa with one hand and tried to prop himself back up somewhat, and I grabbed that hand and twisted it upwards. I squeezed the bony part of his wrist and twisted it upwards and outwards. His body fell over easily, and the extreme pain made the intruder's thoughts quite clear. Hey! What are you? Those were my words after I rotated his arm behind his back, putting me in a position to let me apply additional pressure at any time. This guy was a middle-aged man about the same height as me, and he had a grimy appearance as well, as frizzy hair that was mostly thinned out. He looked quite a crafty guy. I looked past the man at Hagana. It didn't look like he had assaulted her or anything. The only thing I could see was that the corners of her damn cheeky eyes had gotten red and that her hands were trembling a bit. If you don't answer properly, I'll kill you. Even if you remain silent, I'll kill you. I know many deserted lots, and I also know ruffians who came from war-torn regions on Earth. In a place where there was a possibility of maybe just one murder a year, my threat probably sounded like a child's bluff. However, that appraisal depended on the circumstances. The man I subdued pretty much instantaneously let out a hoarse shriek. I twisted his arm lightly and asked him again. What are you? A burglar? Did you know? Then it's okay to punish a burglar by killing him? This time, his shriek was quite clear. Wait, please wait, don't kill me. That'll depend on the circumstances. What's with the mess in this room? Enlighten me. I twisted his arm some more, and he let out a squeal. I knew that it managed to make Hagana cower in fear. She was surprisingly feminine and totally out of it. It's a misunderstanding! A misunderstanding! I'm not a burglar, no way! So then what are you? I'd hardly expect some neighbour to come over for tea and then get angry enough to flip over a sofa, send a table flying with a kick and rip out the carpet. The room really did look that way, like a building marked for demolition. Furthermore, I myself heard Hagana shouting for him to stop, and also her hand was trembling. Well, but it wasn't my fault. It's her fault. Oh yeah? Well, aren't you the self-righteous burglar? Like I said, I'm not a burglar, it's true. I am a debt collector, Debt collector? That's right, I came to collect some owed money. It's just my job. I didn't think he was lying, but I decided to look over at Hagana anyway. After Hagana stared at the suffering man, she noticed my gaze and turned towards me in surprise. Is that the case? When asked, she paused for a second and then nodded. Tch. I clicked my tongue and let the man go. The man crawled along the floor to run away, then turned around. What the? It's just a brat. If you think I'm a brat, want to go for round two? Training up my body had really been convenient for a lot of things. The debt collector shook his head violently and looked up at me through several eyes. So, a debt collector's one of those types, huh? Even they have the right to do all this? Well, I figured. So what are we going to do? Huh? I said, what should we do? Should we call the cops, or are we really gonna do some debt collecting? The debt collector clearly gulped. However, afterwards he lowered his gaze. At most, I'd be lectured at all night in detention. Besides, if you call the cops, I will just read them this loan statement. I don't really want to, since it cost me some fees, but I could totally just go get the courts to foreclose on you. Well, aren't we spung you on? I moved my knee up to scoot over to him, but he suddenly pulled back, so I was unable to force him down anymore. And with that, I remembered one thing from my training. If your opponent stopped yielding, go for negotiations. Well, you're here for the interest and fees, right? Yeah, see, you understand, right? In this world, you can't just borrow money and refuse to show even the smallest signs of paying it back. Besides, I got totally treated like trash. The debt collector glanced over at Hagana. Following his lead, I also looked over. She was cowering against the wall like a pinned butterfly. When the money was lent out, it was all humility and everything, you know? Well, I guess it was Lisa who was lowering her head. Well, I can kind of see that. Oh, you see, right? Why do I have to put up with being called a dung beetle or space trash? Looking at Hagana past the grumbling debt collector, I could see her looking downwards and staring at us with sullen, childish eyes. Besides, it's not like I'm asking for the entire principal back. I know it's impossible anyway, but this is also a business, so I'd like for the interest to be paid back at least. And as he said that, there's no money here for you! Hagana yelled out. The debt collector shrugged and turned towards me with, "See, I told you," written on his face. He's probably in the right. I heaved a sigh of resignation and looked up at him. So, how much? What? The interest, How much is it? Oh, his face lit up. Don't tell that you are gonna. Depends on the amount. Ugh. Saying too much might result in the offer's retraction. Saying too little might end with losing money. I could see the guy tackling this question in his mind for a moment, until he finally came up with an answer. 200 moles. I remembered how Lisa reacted when I had given her 200 moles. So this was it, huh? So that's this month's interest, or this year's interest? This month's, since my top blew over and I did a bunch of things, this is lower than usual. It's actually 6% annual interest on a 50,000 mole principal. Compound interest is kind of annoying, so I just had to set it at 250 moles a month. Since I had totally thought this was some shady loan deal, I was surprised at the relatively low interest rate here. To hide my surprise, I ordered him coldly. Show me the loan agreement. What? At first, the debt collector was speechless, but eventually he reluctantly showed it to me. Those numbers he quoted were certainly written down here. I sighed again and stuck my hand into my pocket. Here. I had run out of 100 mole bills, so I carefully counted out 200 moles worth of bills and handed it to him. He reached out carefully, as if I would smack him the moment he laid hands on the money. After receiving the money, he hunched over the money and counted fruitively. It's good. All right. Well, then I'll be off. Huh? Wait up! I swept his leg quickly with my front leg, causing him to fall over. Then I got up, walked over to him, put my knee in his face, and squatted down. You got some nerve not giving me a receipt. Aren't you just a student? Talk about money doesn't bother me. You tell me. After I said that, the debt collector resigned himself, cut me a receipt, and returned dejectedly. I leaned against the magnificent door of this church, in which hung a crucified man, and saw off the man's faint silhouette before looking back at the receipt in my hand. 200 moles of interest was probably a large amount of money in these parts. If I wanted to earn 200 moles with the job Lisa offered to refer me to, it would take 4 to 5 days worth of income to come up with that amount. Furthermore, in that period of time, there would be food and expenses and rent, along with other consumables such to be paid. In other words, low income meant you couldn't save up money. If you couldn't save up money, you couldn't invest. And if you couldn't invest, you'd be forced to make money by selling your time forever. That is one thing I legitimately need to get into, is investing. I am not good at that. A shovel could not fill a giant hole. You could only fill a giant hole by pushing a snowball down a hill until it snowballed into enormous proportions. I actually hadn't seen snow before, but I had heard advice before about investments and really liked this particular analogy involving snowballs. Simply put, that's why these 200 moles weren't just 200 moles to me. It's something that could become 10,000 moles or even 1,000,000 moles in the future. When Lisa returns, I'd have to get my money back. At least I saw her putting 200 moles in the cupboard. I wasn't going to let her just say she didn't have it. While pondering that, I crossed the prayer hall and returned to the living room. Hagana was putting the furniture back into place. She was emotionless, but somehow I got the feeling that she was angry. It was probably the rough way she was handling the overturned table and kicked up carpet. I would prefer not to refer to her by something that would give off an aura of pettiness, such as girl. However, Hagana unmistakably possessed the delicate XX chromosome, so she was as weak in body as she was strong in spirit. It would be a different story if you had just arrived from Earth, but for people who have lived on the moon for a long time and had gotten accustomed to the low gravity, they'd only be able to deliver a proportionately low amount of force as well. She was trying to put the big sofa back in its place, but it wasn't going too well. She must have noticed me standing in the doorway, but she hadn't asked for any help. She looked like she was just short of telling me that she wouldn't ask for help from the likes of me. I thought she was a cheeky girl, so there was no obligation for me to help. Besides, she hadn't even thanked me yet. I walked past the doorway and was about to go back to my room. I heard a voice just as I was passing by Hagana. "Why won't you help?" She couldn't move the sofa back in place because she couldn't lift it all the way up and a leg was stuck. She tried picking it up from different angles, but none of those attempts worked. Even though she was panting lightly, her eyes were fixated on the task with the weight of a dumbbell. Furthermore, it looked like her princess uterus was in full force. I sighed heavily and replied to her, "Why do I need to help if I haven't been asked?" Sure enough, Hagana lowered her head. With her slender chin and slender neck, her lowering her head made her a textbook example of a delicate girl. My eyebrows wrinkled as I wondered if she was really putting on a show, but she answered me with the following. "If I asked, would you help?" I could feel my face twitching, but if I got mad now, I'd hate myself for acting like a baby. Hence, I prepared myself and answered, "Yeah." "Help me out." I looked back at Hagana in surprise. She was staring back at me with pure black eyes. "Are you deaf?" She continued with a 1-2 combo, just like a relentless princess with a whip. If they push, retreat. When they retreat, push. Hagana's great at arguments. While feeling regret, I really had to help her now that I was said I would. "Alright, I get it. Shit." "What was that last one?" She asked me to repeat what I said, and I clicked my tongue angrily. Hearing that, Hagana totally looked condescendingly at me, wondering what was with this baboon. I felt that it was not in my best interest to let Hagana into my view, so I averted my eyes, put my hands on the fallen sofa, lifted it without bending my knees. Lifting it above her body height was a little bit of a rebellion on my part. Keeping it in that position, I asked her, where would you like this placed, m'lady?" I asked her, interjecting an ample amount of disdain into my tone. However, Hagana didn't show any signs of caring. She looked over at the carpet immediately and pondered. It seemed that my disdain raised not an inch of ire from her. She really got on my nerves. "The rear leg should line up with this spot. The sofa should face perpendicular to this way." After being instructed briefly, I lowered the sofa as she had instructed, since I didn't feel like nitpicking. "It's a bit crooked." Being told that, I gritted my molars, took a deep breath, and was somehow able to suppress my anger. "Is it okay now? Satisfied?" "Yeah, it looks that way." Hagana nodded and turned around immediately to start collecting the various little items scattered on the floor. No words of appreciation came my way. I wasn't expecting any to begin with, but I ended up with feeling anger similar to disappointment. In the village where I grew up, if you did something for someone, they'd thank you for it. If someone did something for you, you returned the favor, of course. The culture over there, which I had considered simple, crude, and outdated, had somehow rooted itself strongly in me. I scratched my head while trying to contemplate all the differences between Hagana and me. I had gotten into a bad mood again, wasting the wonderful resuscitation I had enjoyed from Schrödinger Street. Maybe I should go stroll through Red Valley sometime. On top of that, if I associated with Hagana anymore, there'd be a possibility I might end up laying hands on her. Of course, I didn't mean it in a sexual sense, but in the physical violence sense. What a prick. I was about to leave the living room and walk into the hallway leading to the inner rooms. And thus, when I heard a voice call out to me, I totally thought it was a hallucination. There aren't enough flowers. When I turned around, I saw Hagana putting a vase on the table and arranging the flowers. The stark contrast between the white lily-like flowers and the pitch-black Hagana in juxtaposition was remarkable. However, next to it were some poor flowers flattened by someone stepping on them. I'm guessing that's what she meant. So what? Get some for me. I was pretty much silent as I walked reflexively towards Hagana. If the following words hadn't popped out of her mouth, I would have probably walked right up to her and turned that graceful face of hers into tomato paste. Please. My feet stopped instantly, and I ended up staring steadily at Hagana. She returned my stare in the same manner and said, I asked you to help. So, I should go do it as soon as possible, huh? I couldn't figure out what to say or how to say it. I had confidence in my thought process, but when interacting with these women, I got a strong message that my head wasn't quite screwed on right. I had given my word, and Hagana had, at least in appearance, asked me to do something. Having gotten nothing, not even a thanks in return, I replied bitterly. What kind of flower is it? Staring at me with emotionless eyes, as if saying that it's obvious what flowers she was looking for, Hagana pointed her slender finger at the vase. I don't know where those grow. Me neither. Thinking, what? I furrowed my eyebrows and was about to jab Hagana in the chin, but Hagana's expression remained unchanged. But aren't you as nimble as a monkey? It should be more logical for you to search than me. Why did I have to follow her orders and even have to allow myself to be called a monkey? I wanted to yell at her, but Hagana paid no attention to me, spun her head around, and looked at the vase again. Lisa grew these flowers. It would be a problem if there were less than 7. At that moment, my anger evaporated instantly. Her profile looked so pitiful. However, I quickly corrected my thinking, and told myself it's just a show mimicking people with the XX chromosome. As long as you were born a pretty woman, no matter how rotten you were inside, you'd look like a beauty standing next to some flowers. Well, as long as it was a real problem, I could just go and get some. Even though my refutations were unrelenting, I ended up running off dejectedly to find some flowers. Of course, searching around blindly would be something an idiotic earth dog would do. I took my computer out of my backpack, booted it up, and took a picture of the flower with its camera. I then used an image search on the net and determined what type of flower it was. Furthermore, since doing something bizarre like growing stuff like flowers on the moon could only be due to curiosity, I entered the flower's name and the name of the area around here. Having done that, I found a picture uploaded by some bored and/or curious person of the flower nearby, and hooray, I located the whereabouts of this flower. Oddly, this post that came up also had something to do with the church. Oh, look, isn't this just the cliff above us? A flower aficionado who lived nearby had written a post proudly proclaiming that he taught Lisa how to grow flowers. This was surely the garden on the cliff that I had seen when I had left this place earlier today, and I certainly had the feeling I saw a peak of blooming flowers, too. I turned towards Hagana, who was busy with the cleanup and had occasionally snuck glances at me, and rotated the display towards her. I guess they're blooming on the cliff above us. I see. I need 2 flowers. Don't mess up. It didn't seem like she had even an ounce of inclination to retrieve the flowers herself. Having lost the will to get angry, I closed the computer and got up from the floor. I hopped up onto the 2nd floor and then onwards to the 3rd floor. I stuck something in the annoying auto-locking door to keep it open and went outside. From the lights on the door, I could tell it was almost time for evening mode to kick in. Oh, this is nice. The earth appeared in its usual location and showed me its faint blue figure. I scanned the garden, which had a great view and looked like it would be quite a nice place in which to hang out. After looking around, I found the lilies growing in a flower bed, just like in the photo. When I approached it, 5 flowers fluttered in the light breeze. Since they were so fresh, young, and full of life, I paused, wondering if I should really uproot them. Although I could just not see any traces of 7 flowers having been uprooted before, there was no mistake the flowers Lisa had were originally picked from here. I pulled up 2, shook the dirt off them, and then carried them back down. When I got back, the living room had returned to normal, and Hagana was sitting at the table. She looked up at the 2 lilies in my hands and frowned. What? You said 2, didn't you? The roots are still attached. I took a deep breath and responded slowly. Well, you didn't say that you didn't want the roots. I thought she just ignored that, but she stared at me for a bit and nodded in agreement. Disappointed, I handed the 2 lilies to Hagana. Hagana then grabbed a pair of scissors from the cupboard and started cutting up the flowers in the sink. Her firm movements gave the impression that she was quite experienced at this. Unfortunately, it was in appearance only. She was cutting them straight across the stem. You don't know how? I asked her quickly. How to what? Here, let me see. Why? She furrowed her brows in surprise, but as I approached her and stretched out my hand, she handed me the scissors and the flowers. For this situation, you should cut it diagonal to the stem. It basically lets the stem absorb water a lot more easily. Well, it didn't apply to everything, but it was a basic rule of thumb, and I had learned it at home. I cut the 2 stems at an angle, and Hagana, who had been staring at my hands, looked up at me. Is that true? Probably. I said that with a shrug. Hagana showed a bit of rare emotion in response to my vague response. A slight wrinkle appeared on her forehead, and she lowered her chin. Well, it appeared that Hagana wasn't good with these types of things. Perhaps as a reaction to being stepped on all the time, I started flaunting my knowledge. So I take it you don't know that you're not supposed to store vegetables lying on their side? Vegetables? Their freshness will depend on whether you lay them on their side or stand them up. Hagana had a slightly startled face, as if she was saying, "That's impossible," when she stared at me. She then brought her lips back together quickly. Oh hey, it looked like she was kind of angry. My heart sang for joy. Looked like the thought that I was making fun of her. Looked like she thought that I was making fun of her. That's a lie, right? Why don't you test it out? I immediately returned with a retort. My dad once said that, just as humans would weaken if put in a different environment, vegetables would also weaken if placed in a different orientation from when they were growing. And therefore, there's a difference on how well they kept. It looked like she was just glaring at me, but eventually she turned around and looked at the flowers while speaking in an almost quiet whisper. I'll keep that in mind. I thought exhibiting oddly good behavior, but then her second line came out. Since I'll verify it someday. While still thinking cute couldn't really describe this woman, I did feel that this was the first time we were able to have a real conversation. Hagana retrieved the flowers from me without a word, and still without a word, placed them in the vase. That behavior made me sense a bit of humanity from her, and wonder if I didn't really have such a prejudiced view. If anything, if the flower lover Lisa had raised these flowers, she'd be distraught if she came back to find some flowers missing. Hagana's consideration for Lisa in wanting to replenish the number of flowers, well, I'd have to say that it was girly. I thought that it would be really nice if some of that humanity could be directed towards me, but, of course, I couldn't say that aloud. Actually, I felt defeat at the point when I thought of that and chased those thoughts out of my head. I like this. I'm glad we're seeing more of Hagana and more of what she's about. I'm starting to gel with her character a bit more. It was good. I ended up holding myself in the room I was renting and spent the time searching for money spinners. I felt kind of depressed, but rather than wasting time and money roaming Red Valley aimlessly, I figured I may as well spend some time doing things related to making some bucks. Even the ever-changing world economy news headlines were full of things that could determine movements of the markets tomorrow. If my rivals throughout the world were going to read these articles to plan for tomorrow's trades, then ignoring the news would give me a handicap for the battle ahead. To win the battle, I must do everything possible. Driven by something like obsession, I poured through the news stories, but there were limits to my concentration and patience. I could concentrate on actual trading for hours on end, but I'd gradually lose focus while doing this sort of manual labor that was akin to warm-up exercises. However, I managed to look through everything. By that time, I started feeling a dull pain in the back of my eyes, and the light outside my window indicated it was evening already. Amongst the investors of the world, anecdotes abounded about people who started investing when they were 5 years old, had never missed a day reading the top 10 economy newspapers for decades. Suddenly, I asked myself whether I had been spending my days in such a way that I'd been able to fight with them on even footing. Right now, results had accompanied my trading. My seed money had grown. Recently, however, slump days of neither gains nor losses, like yesterday, had risen. If I broke even during actual trading, then I'd incur losses from the trading fees. Furthermore, my necessity living expenses added to those losses. It would be a lie to say that I wasn't uneasy. I was well aware that if there were days I incurred losses or did not perform that well, then I'd be inclined to needlessly feel depressed about it, especially on the evening of the day when markets are closed at the top of the week. For those kids who actually went to school, they'd have club activities or play around for the day. The advent of a new week, just like the previous, brought a sense of stability. However, I had no such luxury, since each new week would be an unpredictable week full of surprises. Back when I was in the village, I had dreamed of stimulating days like this every day, but the days when I held the opposite opinion had started to increase recently. This line of thought wasn't good, I felt. Feeling depressed brought nothing good. Going back to the village and attending school again was definitely impossible. Therefore, I needed to look forward and spend time constructively. I got up from the bed, and with my light headache spreading a frown across my face, I opened the computer again. Being able to do something about the tug of war being played on my funds would at least make me feel more relieved. With that in the back of my mind, I retrieved one of the 3 scheduled emails of the day from a securities company. It was a mailing list service that had sent information about shitty investment trusts and shady investment opportunities, but occasionally interesting info came out of it, so I decided to peruse it. As always, while I was staring at the table of contents, my mouse cursor had already reached the trash bin. However, what caused my hand to twitch and click the touch mouse was not that the email was full of crap. The opposite, in fact. Amongst the meaningless junk, there stood out the rare something that had some value. An invitation to an investment contest. I had heard of contests that invited people who excelled at stock trading, but was surprised that they invited me. Furthermore, the grand prize was 200,000 mools. My current net worth stood at 70,000 mools, so if I won, I'd increase my funds threefold. However, what drew me in the most wasn't that. Within the invitation for this contest was the following set of catchlines. All eyes from Schrödinger Street are on this contest. In addition to the prize money, the winner might have the possibility of getting scouted. The winner last time, Mr. Tony Rudy, was recruited into Platina Smith, and the winner of the first contest, Mr. Yan Suhu, ended up starting his own hedge fund. What lies in store for the winner this third time? It was a bunch of cheap words intended to draw attention, but having been attracted, I couldn't reject those words. The prize money was obviously important, but the possibility of being able to get a foot in the door of Schrödinger Street, that single phrase totally blew me away. To work in a firm the proper way, I'd have to study my butt off to get into the top tier university and graduate with the top grades with the top of the line major. Furthermore, I wouldn't just be competing with people from the moon. I'd also be competing with a few selected brilliant immigrants from Earth. Therefore, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me. But even briefly looking through my current situation, I could see the grim reality in the way. If I could repeat my fantastic dash that I managed to do right after leaving home, this prize could definitely be in my reach. However, right now, I felt like I was in a tunnel with no visible exit. I probably needed some different type of methodology with what I've been using up until now. While pondering that, I copied out the contents of the email and saved it, just in case. Okay, I know I'm just shy of an hour. I'm just gonna talk for a little bit. I think I'm gonna end it here. But as you can probably hear, when I do these sorts of recordings, especially for visual novels like this, where I'm just constantly reading, my voice is really suffering. And because usually for these ones as well, I stop briefly for like a minute, take a sip of water, and I edit that out. But I haven't done that for this recording, so it is it's hurting me, to put it lightly. It is hurting, but I'll be fine. So yeah, I'm enjoying this. I am very much enjoying the progress with characters. I think Isuna Hasekura's fascination with the economy like, it is honestly kind of baffling. Like, between Spice and Wolf and this, like, he must be an investor. He must be, like, full on into it, and, like, I'm almost kind of curious just how deep his knowledge goes, because, like, the whole world he set up here with the moon's own, like, financial situation and stock markets and everything, it's fucking crazy, man. It's fucking nuts. Um, yeah, like, unless I decide to just stop doing this series, I have a feeling it's going to last for quite a while. So, yeah, let's see how it goes continuing on. This is still episode 1, by the way. I might have to look up how many hours it takes to complete this game, and then the other 2 episodes, and, like, who knows how many I'll make. This is gonna be fucking stupid. It'd probably be the least viewed thing on my channel as well, if I had to guess. Anyway, if you have been listening this far, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one. Catch you later.